time to dump more stuff into our mead.
Step Feed Dump Mead Part 2. All right, so it's been 7 days, bubbling has stopped, time to take a reading, find out if this thing's done, see if it's ready for the next installment of dump. It sounded better in my head than it did coming out of my mouth. So we're just gonna get Mega Made here and take a quick reading. If you remember, this is the mead that we didn't mix. Nothing gets mixed. We just put everything in and let it do its thing. 1.000, like I pretty much expected it to be, not really a problem. Now, everything's been sanitized here, and I'm not that concerned about oxygenation at this point because there's CO2 coming out of here still. I have not degassed, we're not shaking, stirring, or aerating this. It seems fine. By the way, no off smells either. We've had people say that their neighbors complained about the fermentation smell. This was not agitated or really aerated. It smells pleasant to me. I don't get any off smell. I don't smell, rotten eggs or anything like that. So just something to be aware of. I'm gonna pop it on the scale here. We're gonna add another pound of honey. We used orange blossom the first time. I think this is a wildflower. I told you this was gonna be a conglomeration mix of honeys, right? Well, guess what? It is. All right, so here we go. 1 pound of honey. All right, honey's in. Take it off the scale. Put the airlock and lid back on. The yeast went dormant because there was nothing for them to do. At this point, they should be waking back up. This is where I feel like it's important to not wait too long in between feedings, okay? If we had waited like 3 months, those yeast might not be so viable, but 7 days should be just fine, and it's probably gonna kick up fairly quickly. Again, no mixing, no swirling, no nothing. I'm just gonna put this on the shelf and look at it tomorrow just to make sure that it's actually fermenting again, and that's the end of it for probably another week. When I see the activity slow down again, we'll be back with the next installment. 9 more days. See how it did. Notice the raisins and everything are still in here on purpose. I want to get everything we can out of them. Everything still looks fine. Had to get the other scale because it's more than 17 pounds now. So here we go, 1 more pound of honey. There's 2 pounds in there so far. So right now it has a potential for like 9 to 10% alcohol or so. Oh wait, before I put that in, I was gonna take a measurement. Whoops. By measurement, I mean hydrometer reading. Just gonna take Mega Made, drop it in there. It's pretty foamy, which is to be expected. This isn't degassed, and it's only, this was started 16 days ago, so it's actually surprisingly clear too. All right, so I'm expecting this to be dry or nearly so, and yeah, 1.000, went totally dry yet again. Let me get a pen, take note of that. Since this went totally dry, we can add more and keep feeding it. Now, if you decided you wanted to stop right here and you didn't want it to go any further, and I'm saying this only because I know someone's gonna ask and it's a valid question. This would be kind of like a hydromel or a light mead, which there's nothing wrong with that. What you would wanna do is rack and bottle it, okay? If you decided you want it to be sweeter, you rack it, add the sweetener to your taste, and then you pasteurize it after bottling it, okay? That's very, very important. You can't just add the sweetener and then hope it'll work. You wanna pasteurize. But that's a whole other video. We've done a million videos on that. So I'm tearing out my scale. 1 pound, here we go. 14.4 ounces in here, so I need 1.6 more ounces. Let me get more honey. All right, that other honey came from Derek Skinner, one of our viewers, and this one came from Bev's Bees, who is a sponsor of the show, actually. And this is gonna be interesting because it's like totally to the top here.
Do you want a spoon?
Yeah, it might be easier with a spoon because I need 1.6 ounces. We are, however, going to sanitize the spoon first.
Okay, sanitized spoon.
Alrighty, 1.6 ounces. Still gonna make a mess. That's like half an ounce for 1 spoon. Wow. Okay. I didn't know how much it would be. 1.6. I'm not putting that in my mouth. I'd like to. I'm not going to.
But I will.
All right, I'll just put the lid back on this. Put the lid back on this after I take it off the scale. It's good honey, isn't it?
It's good honey.
Yeah. Okay, so that was the 3rd pound, no mixing, no stirring, no nothing, just dumped it in. See in about a week or two when this kicks back up again. It's already starting to. It's actually bubbling already. That's just degassing. It's not really started yet. But it will within like 24 to 48 hours. It'll kick right back up and hopefully continue on. See you then. 5 more days. See if it's done.
As you probably noticed, it's just bubbling happily away. So that could mean either it's simply off-gassing or it isn't done. And
It's been sitting for like an hour, so
that's
it's
why we're
not
going
just gonna be a
to
minute.
take a gravity reading.
Last time it was 1.000. We added some honey, 1 pound of honey, which would bring it to something like a 1.035 or so. Today it is at 1.112. I would say this is not done. I'm not ready to call it over with, so I'm gonna give this another week and see what it does. But let me write that down. Today is 3/22/22, and we did not add any honey, but the reading was 1. Let me make sure that 1.012. So we won't be making another addition at this exact point in time, but we are going to make a subtraction because I feel like the raisins that are in there have done all they're going to do, and we're getting what's called yeast rafts or column yeast or whatever you want to call it floating on them. We're also getting closer to the end of a fermentation, and I don't really feel like having to babysit it, so I'm pulling them out. A lot of people ask me all the time, how long can you leave them in? In theory, you can leave them in for the entire fermentation because you always have a blanket of CO2. Now, in this exact brew, I am removing that lid a lot and moving it around and doing these things. That could be a little bit sketchy for...
Yeah.
Oh, I got it. Could be a little bit sketchy for air being introduced. So because I don't want to take any chances, I'm going to remove these. They've done all they're going to do at this point, so it's all good. That said, how long can you leave them in for? It's totally a judgment call on your part. You don't have to take them out after a week like a lot of recipes say. You don't have to leave them in for, 6 months. Usually, general rule of thumb is anywhere from 2 to 5 weeks, and you're getting pretty much everything you're going to get out of the fruit that you've added. This smells really, really good. It smells a lot like my beginner traditional mead, which, unsurprising because it's basically the same recipe. At this point though, right now, today, I can figure out an approximate almost ABV.
Let's put the lid back on.
That's a good idea. I was just about to say that. Okay. All of this would be more or less approximate because we do have a little bit over a gallon here. So even if I go with, we have 1.2 gallons, right? So that means if a pound of honey is 0.035 in a gallon, what is it in a 1.2 gallons? 0.035 divided by 1.2. It is about 29 points. So this is actually pretty simple math now. We have a pound, then a pound, then a pound. So 3 pounds times 0.029 equals 1.087 for our approximate original gravity. And then if that went dry, which it has not yet, because there's 12 points left, minus 0.012 gives us 0.075 times 135. This is the same formula I always use. Original gravity minus final gravity, take that number times 135. All I did is I added up the additions. Each one was independent and they all fermented out except the last one, so that's where that 12 points came from. If this is clear as mud, I'm going to have a nice little graphic explaining it all for you right there.
Non più tra I farfalloni amoroso, notte giorno di torno girando, delle belle turbando al riposo.
But that gives us 10.125% alcohol, which is an approximation. It could be anywhere from about 10 to 12%, I'm figuring, because if this had been an actual gallon, it would be about 14%. So I'm guessing with the 1/4 of a gallon extra, something like that. And I know someone's going to tell me that there is a way to calculate the exact amount, and I'm not worried about it. We make brews for the average person at home, and I'm explaining it for the average person that has a calculator, a fermenter, and a hydrometer. And that's it. If you have to use a lot of specialized equipment to do it, I don't really want to have to bother. That's as simple as it gets. So what are we going to do? We're going to let this sit for another week, and we're going to check it again.
But first, I want to say a special thank you to someone, because in the mail we were sent these. These are the little screw cap bung replacements for 1 gallon fermenters. And they're really handy because you don't have to worry about them popping out of the...
Yeah, we use rubber bands to keep the corks in sometimes. This keeps them from popping out.
So this was gifted to us from, and excuse me if I'm saying your name wrong, Steba, S-T-E-B-A. So thank you so much for sending that. We are very appreciative, and thank you so much for watching.
See you in a week. 8 more days have gone by. It was at 1.012. What is it at today? Okay, we're at 1.000. Perfect. That's what I was hoping it would do. So let me take a note on that. 3:30, 22, 1.000. So what I want to do is dump this back in. This is called the dump mead after all. And I want to add some more honey to this. But now comes the question. We put in 1 pound, then another pound, then another pound. There is 3 pounds of honey in here right now, which is a normal amount for a mead. We did use an 18% yeast for this though, so it can, in theory, go higher, because that goes to somewhere between 13 and 15%. I don't know the math off the top of my head. But if I add too much now, it could stall and then be too sweet. We don't want that to happen. If I don't add enough, it just means we have to keep adding and adding and adding. So my thinking is this. It's low enough that a 1/2 pound should be okay, because that's about 17 points, okay? So that would bring us to about like 1.017. If that only fermented halfway or only part way and brought us down to like a 1.010 or a little bit below and stopped, I'm okay with that. I think that works quite well. So let's do 1/2 pound, and let's use Beverly's Orange Blossom Honey.
Alrighty.
Why not? Need a scale. All right, really simple. Got it on my scale, got a jar of honey, 1/2 pound.
Okay, so as you may or may not have noticed, we are not using our typical scale, our baker scale, which is our favorite scale, because
this weighs more than that scale can handle.
It does. So we are using the scale. I'll make sure to link this in the description below, so that way if you're playing along and going something heavier than what our typical scale would use, you can get this one.
This one goes to 50 pounds. It's the one we used to use a couple years ago.
Yeah.
It still works, it's just not quite as accurate as the other scale. Either one's good. Okay, lid goes back on. Let me make a note. Stick my note back on it.
And we're wash, rinse, and repeat.
Goes back in the fermentation station. See you in a week. It's been 15 more days. Let's do another check and see how it's doing.
So Brian came up with the brilliant idea of just removing the airlock rather than dealing with the threads of doom.
Yeah.
So that's what we did to take our reading.
I'm a natural blonde. What can I say? Every once in a while, the brain works. Now, we have added 3.5 pounds of honey already to this mead. So it may very well be done. We don't actually know yet, and we won't really know for another week, because the idea is I want this to end a little bit sweet. I'll explain what I mean by that in a minute. So, let's see, how did we do this time? Totally dry, 1.000 yet again. So, let me explain a little bit of the theory. Actually, let me dump this back in. This is why you take the lid off, because it's easier to dump this back in. Carefully, so you don't spill or, well, I spilled a few drops. Or splash is really the big thing.
Yeah, you don't want to splash.
Don't want to introduce extra oxygen. Now let me explain the theory behind making a step feed mead. I could have very easily just put 3 or 3.5 pounds of honey into this and let it go. And based on the yeast, that we used, it would totally go this high, no problem. But the idea behind a step feed is you want to feed it until it gets to where you want it. It takes longer than a normal mead, okay? You're seeing this. This is several steps. But today we're gonna add a little bit more honey. But at this point, because we're so close, I am only adding enough that if it fermented none of it, I am okay with that. So we're gonna do a 1/4 pound of honey today. I may end up having to do another 1/4 pound another time, but it's better to put in not enough and have to do another fermentation cycle than to put in too much and have it come out overly sweet. That's not what we wanna do. So we're just gonna add a 1/4 pound of honey today. Time for the threads of doom.
We got a good seal.
Yeah, no kidding. Wet hands too. There we go. Now I'll put it on my scale. It's not a good idea to try doing that on your scale because you can hurt the scale. We are using a 50-pound scale. Not that the scale weighs 50 pounds, but it can measure up to 50 pounds. And we are going to be putting in a 1/4 pound of honey, or 4 ounces, or 112 grams. This smells pretty good. It really does. It has a nice smell to it. And I'm using Bevy's honey, which is pretty good stuff. Really good stuff. Pretty good stuff. Just because this is what was handy, we have a partial jar, so I'm going to use it up. We've put in a few different kinds of honey in this one, as I recall. Let me sanitize my hands. All right, I took a note. I put on it 1.000, today's date, and then I added another 1/4 pound of honey. I also did not mix it yet again, because that's the whole point of this. And I think this is a really interesting experiment because it's proving something to me that mixing isn't necessary. Now, the only reason why I think shaking it up and mixing is a good idea is aeration for the beginning of fermentation. That's where like the sulfury egg smells can happen if you don't do that. We got lucky. This didn't do that, but I know other people that have not aerated enough did get that. And it could also be because we started with such a low gravity that we didn't stress the yeast. So this is showing a couple of different concepts here that are really, really interesting to me. But the coolest one is that you can just totally make mead by taking a fermenter and dumping some stuff in there and letting it wait a while, and then dumping some more stuff in there, and then, you know, wait a while and dump some more stuff in there. That's basically what we're doing. But what are we gonna do with this now?
We're gonna let it sit.
Give this another week, maybe 2, let it ferment that out, take a reading, see you then. Okay, we're back. And it's been several weeks. This was started March 1st, we're now April 21st. This is the Dump Mead, as you probably know, because you've been watching this all along, even though we're making separate videos. So what I'm gonna do is take the airlock out, and we're gonna take a reading. Okay, so today we're looking for either a 1.000 confirmation that it fermented that again and we need to add more honey, or a higher number than 1.000, ensuring that we've pretty much reached the tolerance of the yeast. Now, does that mean it's completely done? No, it just means I'm not gonna add any more honey at this time. And I'm gonna do something a little bit out of the ordinary. We are going to rack this because I'm at 1.004. Now, why am I gonna rack it? Because I'm pretty sure fermentation's complete. It's been another week. And let me just do some quick math for you to show you what we're up against here. So we started with 1 pound. Now, we know 1 pound of honey adds about 0.035 specific gravity, right? Making it 1.035. So we've added a pound, then it went dry. Now, because it went dry every time, this is really easy. We added a pound, then a pound, then a pound, then a half pound, then a 1/4 pound. So we have 3 3/4 pounds of honey in here. So 3.75, 3 3/4 times 0.035, it gives us a 1.131 original gravity, okay? 1.131 minus 1.004 gives us 127 points of gravity used up times 135, which is my coefficient of choice. If you don't know why I use that, we have a video on that. Gives us 17.14% ABV. Now, I wanted this to be more or less a sack mead. Anything above 15 to 16% is considered a sack mead. Keep in mind, this was a dump mead, meaning it was never mixed, never had the bejesus taken out of it, so there's plenty of bejesus still in there. I'm shocked it made it to 17%, and it doesn't smell funky, because normally you'd expect a strong sulfury smell if you didn't oxygenate this enough, because remember, I didn't get to oxygenate it either because I couldn't mix it. But in our small sample, I mean, it smells young. Smells like a green mead, but it's 17% too.
Yeah, I mean, if it was sulfury, I would not be able to take that large of an
Doesn't smell like
inhale.
rotten eggs in any way, shape, or form. There's been no unpleasant aromas off of this fermentation at all. So we're going to do our preliminary taste test. This is where we take a test of it and we don't say anything because we're going to be doing a full tasting of this later on.
Well, it's not even done, so it doesn't really matter. It hasn't cleared or degassed or... That's Brian's poker face.
I need a second opinion for myself.
I have to second his second opinion.
You want some more too?
Yes, I have to second your second opinion.
You know how hard it is to not say anything? I have a lot of trouble not talking. I know that's shocking to most of you, right? Okay, so this is ready to be racked. We're just gonna put this in another fermenter. Racking, as always, we're gonna use an auto siphon. I'm leaving the cap on because there's all kinds of stuff in here. We have not racked this at all. In fact, this is the first time I think the lid's coming off other than to add honey.
Now, this is the Little Big Mouth bubbler with the spigot. So in theory, we could use the spigot to rack this, but because we don't have as much of a height difference between the base of our table and the height of our stool, we're just gonna go ahead and rack it with the auto siphon.
And I totally forgot. She's just trying to cover for me. Let's just be honest here. So I'm just gonna put the source in here, destination in there, go about halfway down like I always do. Give it a few pumps, get things going, and there we go. I am gonna hold it to the side though, because there's a lot of stuff in here. There's raisins that settled out, there's citrus zest floating around. We wanna give it the best shot to get the most liquid out. There's always gonna be some waste. That is just part of homebrewing. Can we get a filter of some kind and probably get an ounce or two more? Sure, or we could just make another brew. I don't really worry about that last ounce or two. I just call it part of doing business. So we racked it. It's like full to here. So that's why we like to use the Little Big Mouth bubblers, because you can get a full gallon out of it. This is actually probably like 1¼ gallons almost by the time you get down to it. And we're putting it under airlock again because, well, why?
Well, even if it's not continuing fermentation, which it probably isn't at this point due to our checkings and readings, it will be degassing naturally. And so we don't want those gases to build up pressure in our bottle, creating a bomb. We want them to go bloop, bloop, and go out naturally through the airlock.
Yeah, there's a little bit of carbonation in there still.
There's another little thing I want to talk about with airlocks, because this has come up a lot recently, and that's the cap. So the cap for our airlocks has a series of little holes on the very top. If your cap does not have holes, you want to investigate of how the cap connects to the top of your airlock. Some of them, I've heard, have been designed where there's actually little slots in the top of the airlock, and that's where the gas releases.
Usually the ones that have the red caps are that way.
If that is the case, then you're fine. Go ahead and put the cap back on. Your gas is going to escape. However, if you don't have any place for your gas to escape and your cap doesn't have holes, you're probably going to want to add some holes to your cap.
Right. I don't understand why they would ever make one that was sealed, because that kind of defeats the whole purpose. It's not supposed to be a protective cover. It's actually supposed to be a cover that keeps bugs out. You know, it's supposed to have a function. So check that, because usually, like I say, it's the ones with the red caps seem to have the slots underneath where the cap goes on, and the clear caps seem to have holes in the top. But you want one or the other.
Yep.
Probably, but not both. Though I guess that would be fine too. Anyway, so what are we going to do with this now?
We're going to let it sit.
For how long?
We don't know.
Could be a week, could be 2 weeks, could be a month. Why do we let it sit?
We're trying to let it clear. So there's still some sediment that is in fermentation. No matter how many times you rack, is part of the brewing process. And I've had people talk about this and they say in the comments, oh, but there's sediment in the bottom of my brews even after racking. Well, if you've ever gotten a really good handcrafted brew, be it a soda or a beer or a kombucha or a multitude of things, you will notice, even in those commercially made, there's a little bit of sediment in the bottom of the brew.
Yeah, as things age proteins are made and broken down and made into new things, and compounds are always changing. And sometimes they produce compounds that fall out of solution. And that's exactly what that is. It's not harmful. I mean, you can shake it right back in and drink it if you want to. It might be slightly unsightly. And it's not even just a factor of homebrew. Like Jerica said, it's a good quality commercial brew will be that way too, but a lot of time they filter them before they put them into a bottle, and they also don't naturally carbonate most of the time. They're usually pressure carbed, just CO2 injected into it. So a little bit different thing, but even then, you're still gonna get some dropout of sediment over time. Maybe not right away, but over time, a year, 2 years, it'll still happen. It's just a thing. It's not anything to be afraid of. We've actually had people say that they dumped their brews out because they saw
don't do that.
sediment. Don't do that. You probably made an amazing brew. Don't waste it. Worst case, just pour really carefully and leave that last little bit in the bottom of a bottle. I mean, I don't drink it myself. I just leave that little bit and move on and don't think twice about that one mouthful that I didn't get that was going to have all that stuff in it that I probably don't want in my mouth. Anyway, it's not harmful. I just don't like it. It's just,
he has a thing.
it's a thing. I just don't do it, okay? There's nothing wrong with you if you want to do it. I know somebody that drinks the sludge at the bottom when they're fermenting. Stacy's husband, John, does that. I don't understand, but he does it. I just can't. So, there you go.
Anywho, so after the appropriate amount of time has occurred, we will be back. We'll let you know how much time that was, and we'll let you see what it looks like then.
See you then.
Okay, so it's been about 2 weeks. Let's give it another check.
Yeah, we gave it longer because I wanted it to clear a bit more. It seems like it's clearing now, but it wasn't very clear before. So I gave it another week or so just to see what would happen. So we're gonna take our second reading, because we always take 2 readings just to make sure it's really done. The last one was 1.004. Do I expect that it's gonna drop much or that it would even change? Not really. And honestly, if it changed a couple points, am I really gonna let it sit longer? No, I'm gonna actually rack and bottle this today. I just like to know what it's doing. I do love the color of this. It looks like mead. This is exactly what the color of mead should be. Very like straw and amber together. Okay, so give that a little spin and let's see where we are. 1.004. I'd say 5, but it's 4, 1.004. And again, that speaks to the accuracy of homebrew. You know, that 1 point, it doesn't mean a lot. No, but if you're consistently 1 point off, 1 point off, 1 point off, over time, that could be 5, 6, 10 points. Before you know it, you're off by 1 or 2 percentage points of alcohol by volume. Really? Does it matter? 12%, 13%, 9%? Who cares? That's my feeling on it. Everybody takes it a little bit differently. Do need to take a note, though. My page is full.
Sometimes I think he makes these comments on purpose just so that the comment section can explode and make more work.
No, it's a fair assessment because, honestly, 12% versus 12.5 versus 13. Most people, and I mean almost everyone, probably can't tell the difference in taste. If you didn't tell them, they wouldn't know. So if you said it's 12% when it's actually 12.5, nobody's going to go, no, this is 12.5. Nobody's going to do that. And even commercial winemakers have a tolerance range of like 2% in each direction. So your wine that you bought that says 15% might actually be 13. So if commercial makers can be that far off, homebrewers don't really have to worry about it so much. Next step though, we are going to rack this to a pitcher and bottle it up. So as always, we want to move it from one vessel to another, and that is called racking. And to do that, we use an auto siphon. If you don't have an auto siphon, you can try just using tubing, but honestly, the auto siphon only costs a couple bucks more. Just go ahead and get that. What you want to do is have one vessel higher, one vessel lower. We're using a pitcher so that we can have measurements, and as you can tell, everything was sanitized. And I'm just going to put this guy in here. I do have the cap off so as to allow it to go all the way to the bottom. And I want to make an observation about this already. The smell is honey. It's just straight up pure honey. That's very surprising. Okay, so we racked it to the pitcher with the raised numbers on the side, and it's about 132 ounces, which is, you know, for those of you who are attuned to such things, about 4 ounces more than a US gallon. By the way, yes, we use US gallons. Do you hear the words coming out of my mouth? Do I sound like I'm from Great Britain and I would use the imperial gallon, which is 5 liters? No, it's actually not 5 liters, it's slightly less. 4.5 something, yeah. No, we use US gallons, but I'll probably have the measurement in liters down here. It's 3.75 liters is a 1 US gallon. That extra 4 ounces makes it's about 3,900 milliliters. Okay, so 3.9 liters is what we are according to this. We do have bottles for that. We're gonna bottle it. To bottle, it's the same thing as racking. You still want source and destination being the bottle lower, and we just add a bottling wand to it, which you want to just put on a little bit so you can take it back off. Has a stem valve in the end, also known as a springy thingy, and when you push that into the bottom of the bottle, the fluid can flow. When you release, it stops. Can you bottle without one of these? Yes. You will just make a little bit more of a mess and probably waste a little bit more product. So we're just gonna bottle this, see in a minute. So, as you can see, we have our big, silly, stupid bottle, then we have 2 1 liters, and then we actually have our tasters already poured. That used it all up. I might have been able to fit a little bit more in there, but it's okay. What'll happen is one of these is gonna go away for a year. The other 2 will probably just consume relatively quickly, assuming we like this one. So the only way to find out if we like it is through a tasting. Magic of cameras and editing. So, on the tasting, this is when we talk about the color, clarity, aroma, all those things that go into a brew. Color-wise?
It's beautiful. Like Brian said earlier, it's a lovely
mead.
Amber color. It's a little cloudy, but considering we just bottled this,
Yeah.
I think it's probably going to clear out.
Yeah, we probably could have left it for 3 or 4 more months and it might have cleared, okay, to be honest. But I think it's ready.
Yeah, yeah.
So yeah, color and clarity, it's like a 7. I mean, it's not bad, 7 to an 8. On the smell though, honey, honey, honey. I do get a little bit of ethanol.
Yeah.
Interestingly enough, and part of the reason why that happens is I just did an estimate of what this has in it. It has 3 3/4 pounds of honey in it, which comes out to about 17.7% alcohol in a gallon. This is a little bit more than a gallon, so I'm going to call it at 17.5%, which is probably why it's stuck at 1.004. It didn't get stuck, but it stayed at 1.004. The reason it stayed there is because the yeast were done. We had hit their alcohol tolerance, because 18% is their tolerance, which is more of a guideline than a hard and fast rule, because, as we all know, yeast can't read. So 17.5, 18, they don't really know the difference. But they had stopped, and that's why it stayed at 1.004 for a couple of weeks.
My brain is telling me there's something else on the nose to this one, and I can't quite put my finger on it, and the only thing I can think of is that I am getting more of that alcohol smell.
Yeah.
And so it's reminding me more of a spirit than a mead.
Okay. If you listen to all of the don't do this and don't do that's of mead making.
We did practically all of those.
Yeah, I mean, this should have off flavors. It should be harsh tasting. It should be nasty. It should have a sulfury smell. We did things wrong that we say you shouldn't do, yet we didn't do them. Like, we didn't shake it up. We didn't aerate this. We didn't get the bejesus out. There's plenty of bejesus in there. We didn't do any mixing. And then we just kept adding and adding and adding until it stopped. Never degassed it, never anything. Nothing. This is good.
Yeah.
There's no off flavors, there's no weirdness, there's no harshness, there's no nothing.
I really don't know what to say.
The only thing I would like is a little bit more mouthfeel. It does have a touch, it's a little bit light on the mouthfeel. But not bad. I mean, it's not horrible by any means. Now, we did a few things right. We did add some things to enhance flavors and textures. We did add raisins, we added some of the citrus zest, and we did add Fermaid O for a yeast nutrient. So technically, all the parts were there. It was the methodology that was different.
Yeah.
And I just find that really fascinating. This was an experiment to see, like, what happens? Will it work? The answer is, yup, it totally does. And the proof that it works comes from the gravity readings, because whether we took a reading on that honey or not doesn't matter. We put in 3 3/4 pounds of honey into a liquid. There should have been a reading there if it wasn't fermenting. So the fact that that went down to 1.004 from something like a 1.13 something, what it could have been, yeah, it totally fermented. And it's rather obvious. This has a pretty decent ethanol kick to it. It's not an overpowering taste, though.
No, no.
Now, the next question is, how old is this? This is almost 8 weeks at this point in the glass. That's really fast for mead to begin with, but to have something that is this polished feeling after 8 weeks that we treated like crap. I mean, we did not take care of this mead.
We neglected this mead.
And it still tastes this good. Mead making's easy, guys. We don't need to make it more complicated. It's a super simple thing. I mean,
would I recommend you doing this?
no.
Not really.
I'd probably mix them.
Because
It's a chance.
all signs point to failure, but
It's a risk, is what it is. It's kind of like you take out insurance because you hope that you don't get in a car accident or you hope that your house doesn't blow up. But it doesn't mean that everybody that has insurance is going to have a car accident or their house is going to blow up.
Sure.
So it's a risk. It's just something that could happen. Could we have had problems even with doing everything right? Absolutely. We hear about it all the time. It can happen. We're working with natural biological processes here, so anything can happen.
they
Everybody's
have their
conditions
own
are
rule
different.
book. We can tell them what they're supposed to do, but they're
There's
going to just
guidelines.
look at you and say, sounds like somebody's got a case of asbestos.
Yeah, I look at yeast like cats.
Yeah, right?
They pretty much just do what they want no matter what, but they'll make you think that they're listening.
They're not.
Yeah. But overall, I would say this is a 100% success. Absolutely resounding success as an experiment, showing that there's a lot of leeway in the way you do things.
Now, with that said, I feel like this tastes different than most of our meads.
Okay.
But I can't really pinpoint to what the difference is. It might be that it retained more of its honey character.
Oh, it did.
Particularly for something this relatively dry. It's not super dry.
It's
but
only 4 points
yeah.
over dry. It tastes almost sweet.
But it tastes more like honey than
Oh, I didn't do the travel thing.
sweet. Do the travel.
Let me take you on a trip. Well, you know what? I need another sip to do that.
For science.
Okay, on the entrance, the first thing I'm greeted with is honey. It literally tastes a little bit like you just put honey in water and mixed it together, and that's what you have. Immediately following that, I get a slight astringency from it, which I can only say is probably the alcohol and maybe some of the tannic aspect of the raisins and the zest. The citrus is giving a little bit of an acid, but not, it can't be that much, but I'm detecting it in a slightly astringent flavor. And then as it gets into the mouth, a little bit fruity almost, and that's probably from the raisins, and then sort of floral, not overly so, just kind of a, what kind of honey is this? Oh, we used all kinds of honey.
Yeah,
This was like
we just-
an amalgamation of honey. So I'm sure there was orange blossom in there. I'm sure there was wildflower in there. So the flowery aspects of those and the citrusy aspects, it's coming through. And then this is where it lets me down a little bit. Normally at that point is when you feel that viscous mouthfeel. It's a little lacking on that. I wish it had a little bit more. If we had put tea into this, I think it would definitely go up, or anything to add some tannins. If we oaked this, it would definitely bring it up more. We intentionally did not do an alterations before we bottled it because we wanted this to be as pure as it could be without saying, oh, it needs this or it needs that. No, we want to know what it's really like. So that's why we did it that way this time. On the finish, it's got a rather long finish. I think the ethanol is keeping it kind of in the mouth longer. On the exhale, it's honey and flowers. It's really, really nice. And then the finish is very long, a little bit of an ethanol bite. The ethanol bite is not as strong as I thought it was going to be based on the smell. It actually is smoother than the smell would suggest,
I would agree.
and the aroma is really actually quite pleasant.
Now, if you watch carefully, you'll notice that when Brian starts his, let me take you on a trip, I immediately take another sip and let it stay in my mouth. And then I'm just sitting here like a bobblehead.
Because she's trying to find all the things
Because
I'm saying.
I'm like, And I'll even pre-monologue in my head what's next. And then he'll say what I'm thinking. Scary.
Yeah,
huh?
we've been married a long time.
So the only thing I would add in my experience is something that I tend to get from beverages that Brian doesn't get. And that's when he was describing the mouthfeel. It doesn't have that viscous mouthfeel that we like to experience in meads because we feel that's important because it's a honey thing. It should have a certain amount of viscosity to it. I was getting that, what I term effervescence, the tingling sensation on my tongue.
Now I gotta see if I can find it.
And in this particular case, I'm attributing that sensation to the alcohol rather than to any other element that's in the beverage, because we didn't add clove, we didn't add any type of element that should cause that sensation, and it's not unpleasant and it's very slight. So I'm thinking because the viscosity is missing, my brain is going, oh, well, you kind of got a tongue tingle going on.
I don't get the tongue tingle. Not at all.
And that's common.
Nothing. Nothing.
So we have to number this now.
Yeah, and here's the thing. In my head, I want to give this a higher score because I know what we didn't do.
Right.
So on a difficulty level, this is like the simplest thing ever, and wow, it's so good. But I have to be realistic. I have to sneeze. All right, hold off till we're done. Okay. But I want to be realistic and give a score based on no knowledge of the product. Okay, so if I was handed this and said, what do you think of it? That's where I'm going with my score.
All right.
Not knowing that this has bejesus in it and it was treated badly and it was like the redheaded stepchild just thrown in the corner and ignored. It was kept in a cupboard under the stairs. Anyway, I believe I have a score.
Yep.
You ready? 1, 2, 3,
6.
7.
I'm just stuck on 6. I don't know why. I gave it a 6 because I guess I'm really missing that viscosity in it more than I really thought I should. Again, as Brian prefaced this, if this was based on what my knowledge was on this brew, it would be significantly higher. It'd be like, why do you taste so good? You shouldn't taste good at all. But because I'm just like, okay, blind, clean slate, just wipe it all clear. It's good. I drink it. It's fine. And it just has room for improvement.
I went with 7 for a lot of the same reasons she went with 6. To me, this has 3 points of improvement left in it before it's like spectacularly, amazingly good. And those 3 points can come from some viscosity and mouthfeel and some age. I think a little bit more age on this would take some of there's a couple of harsh edges.
Yep.
And I think if they mellow just a little bit, this would go up a little bit more. But what this really is my basic mead with less sweetness and less raisin character, actually. There's a lot less raisin flavor here and less of the citrus. So it's more of a pure mead, a pure honey wine, if you will. It's not a bad thing, just stating what it is. So from my experience, this falls almost into my wheelhouse, but not quite. It's like on the borderline. But we have 3 bottles of this. 1 bottle is going to be saved for a year. I guarantee you the other 2 bottles will not last more than a month because I will drink this. This is something I will say, oh yeah, let me have some of that.
Yeah.
And I'm gonna reach for it and choose it over other things that we've made. That's why I went with a 7 because it's in the middle range of things that I would drink. That's the easiest way to say it.
Yeah.
It's not like the best of the best, but it's not the low end either. I would choose this above, say, like the dry mead that we made. I would choose this above the blueberry mead that we made. And those are things that I will reach for and drink. But I think this is just a little bit better. I would really like to see what this is like in a couple months, though.
I agree.
Like, I may have to leave one of those bottles for a couple months just to see, because it's mind-blowing how badly we treated this one and how good it came out. So
Yeah.
if this gives you any information from this video at all, it's that mead making is simple. As I always say, mead wants to make itself. All we have to do is stay out of the way. In this case, we stayed out of the way and we let it do its thing. We didn't even give it the pushes and helps that we recommend doing, and it still worked. So
We just kept feeding it when it said it was done.
yeah, I mean, that's all you gotta do. So, you know, if you're afraid to make mead, try this. Granted, this might not be your first mead ever, and I would mix it. I would at least mix it and aerate those things.
And
Follow my first mead, my beginner mead. Just follow that video. Just do that for your first one.
I would like to put a very strong caveat on this particular process. So this was a test for us, and this was a test that we were comfortable doing because we have a ridiculous amount of honey. Now, we know honey is expensive, and so we don't recommend you attempting this in your
don't waste
home, because if what was predicted would happened to you, you would be very angry at us. So please don't do that.
It could be potentially almost 4 pounds of honey wasted.
Yeah, so do the normal practices, and better safe than sorry, right? But this was a fun test. I'm shocked by the results, and if for some reason you have a ridiculous amount of honey and you want to try it, then try
Go for it. But as always, guys, thank you so much for watching, and have a great day.
Bye-bye.
Non più tra i farfalloni amoroso, notte e giorno di torno girano, delle belle turbando al riposo, Narcisetto Adolgino d'amor, delle belle turbando al riposo.